You need to do it. You need to do it straight. At least that's been my motto. Okay, Victor, set up.
Yeah. All right, I will get this meeting started and call the roll. John Cups,
Here.
John Leo,
Here.
Jamie Melky,
Here.
and Nancy Rondell.
Here.
All right, we do have a quorum. The mayor is not able to attend, so we'll have, the council members will have to select a acting mayor. No.
I nominate Sean Leo.
I was gonna nominate Jamie, but that. probably-
Yeah.
All in favor of John Leo as acting mayor? Aye, all right.
Okay, well, thank you, shall we do? I figured it was gonna be a job, so. Well, we're gonna do these instead of the flag of the United States. Indivisible, liberty and justice for all. At this point, we have citizens' comments. Any person interested in addressing council on a matter not listed on the agenda? This is your chance. You have up to 3 minutes to communicate to council. Anyone in the audience that would like to speak? Mr. Rondell.
Mark Rondell, 81 old. I've highly edited this. I think I can get it in 3 minutes. I go fast. And I apologize to those of you who heard some of this before, sometimes, many times, but I repeat because I think it's very important and pertinent. City Council, the tremendous voter turnout in the recent election is an emphatic cry from the people of this town of their desire for strong and effective leadership. Their expressed wishes for you particular candidates shows that they trust you individuals to make the wise and difficult decisions needed. It is now up to you to act and uphold that trust. I would like to speak briefly in metaphor. The city presently is somewhat akin to a ship at sea in a terrible storm. The ship is fighting the wind and waves, but her rudder and steering gear are damaged. She is being thrown about this way and that by the competing opinions of various groups of citizens. One group wants to see the substation here. Another wants it over there. One group is opposed to paid parking. The others see it as a way to fund city expenses. We're spending a great deal of time and effort just fighting the effects of the storm and not making critical forward progress. I attribute this to a breakdown in our system of codes and regulations. Should we follow the laws exactly to the letter, or should we continue with our current system of allowing a subjective appeal to those aggrieved by some requirement or another? This lack of clarity has led to resentment, charges of unfairness, and a perceived lack of caring leadership. We need desperately to fix these inconsistencies in our regulations. But our ship has an even greater problem than just the lack of steering. She also lacks a map or chart to show which way to steer to a safe harbor. The city is required to have a master plan. This plan is supposed to describe the vision for the Harbor Springs of the future. Unfortunately, our current master plan is woefully inadequate. It fails to describe clear and well-defined goals for what we want to see down the road. It fails to prioritize between, for example, the need to maintain and improve road, water, and electrical systems versus the relative importance of views or recreation. It fails to address the critical nature of commerce and industry to the long-term prosperity of the town. It fails to embrace the need for growth and change. No matter how hard we may try to keep things the same, we will not succeed. Our master plan, our chart needs to be much more comprehensive and accurate for us to know our present location and how to set our course to arrive at the Harbor Springs we wish to bequeath to our children and grandchildren. I charge you, the current city council, to uphold the trust that the voters have handed you in this recent election, to recognize the privilege and the responsibility that you have at each and every meeting to make the most of these few occasions and tackle the difficult and far-reaching decisions needed to guide us to a more secure and sustainable future community. I ask that you please start with crafting a much more specific and accurate and well-defined master plan. Without a detailed and informative chart, we are doomed to continue aimlessly drifting, taking whatever course the winds and waves of the anti-growth, anti-change, NIMBY, small town character, resort community tempest chooses to blow us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I would just like to publicly thank everybody who supported the village, and especially Linda and the group, that the committee that got together to help support the village. It was a relief across the street with the officers that we have. I recruited some young officers that have done an outstanding job, and just the fact that they know that their job's secure for the next few years they're very grateful. So thanks, Linda. Thanks everybody who supported the village, and I promise to continue to spend physically responsible with everybody's money. So thank you.
Ms. Rockwitz.
Linda Rockwitz, 519 East Third Street. And I just hope that every city employee and all of you on the council, everybody involved in our town feels validated and appreciated by this election. You have endured some very difficult challenges, and I applaud you for the gracious way you listened and tried to handle things. And I hope that you all know now how appreciated you are. And thank you again for your service.
Thank you, Linda. Anyone else? Items not on the agenda? Okay. So we move on to the consent agenda.
I would like to add that Clerk Whitaker was not in the past few days, was not able to get the minutes in, so there are no minutes in your packet for approval. We will approve those at the December 5th meeting.
Minutes aside, everybody okay with the consent agenda?
Good.
Motion to approve?
Yeah, we should first ask if there's any public comment about.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Any public comment on the consent agenda? I don't know what this. Okay, how about a motion now?
I'll make a motion to approve with the exception of the minutes.
I'll second it.
Okay. We need a roll on this or just consensus?
All in favor.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay.
Okay, the first agenda item is a council orientation and rules order. This is something that we've started doing.
What we're interested in is gonna come up at the last, I think, or
It's a way to have council members who have served, just to reorient themselves with the government structure and some of the changes that have happened. And as well as for the new council member, which in this case is council member Melky, just to be more familiar with the government and how we do operations. It's also a good opportunity for the public just to have a refresher in how we do things here and the structure of our local government. So I'll get started on this presentation and I'll try to keep it to about 15 minutes or so. So your council members, Mayor Mapagera, John Cups, John Leo, Jamie Melky, and Nancy Rondell. Brief outline of this presentation. First, we're gonna do a general government structure, talk about the council's structure and the authority the council has, the city manager roles and authority, and the staff that falls under city manager, their roles and their duties. We'll get into a little bit about the budgeting, the funds and the millages, talk about the importance of ordinances and resolutions, the relevance of Open Meetings Act for council as well as for other boards. Then dive into the meeting structure of council meetings and talk about our boards and commissions, finally, with an emphasis on our regional boards and other organizations that don't meet here, but that we are a member of. Government structure. So the Michigan State Constitution was amended in 1908 to allow home rule. This change sanctioned the voluntary incorporation of densely settled areas into villages or cities. So we have some quotes there about how the Constitution came to be and how it was amended. Here's a map of Harbor Springs, well, old map of Harbor Springs. The legislature passed a bill in 1880 allowing for the establishment of the village of Harbor Springs. Village government formed in Harbor Springs in 1881. Then Harbor Springs became a city in 1932. So it's been about, well, today is our 90th year. So not today, but this year. Cities. So there's 276 cities in Michigan. This has increased from 271 last year. So there is 263 or so villages in Michigan last year, and those went down to 257. So as we saw, 5 villages have become cities, and that's how the process works. What's the difference between a city and a village? A city is withdrawn from the township control, whereas a village remains incorporated within a township. The cities oversee property assessments, and we do the tax collection on behalf of the county and the school district, whereas in the townships, they do not. The villages do not collect the taxes for the townships or schools. The county does. We provide several services to residents. And we oversee elections, where villages, for example, they don't oversee elections. So those are just some of the main differences in the structure and operations of the city versus the village. Our city charter was adopted on October 6, 1932. It was revised in 1950, 1979, and 1993. We do have a charter committee that we established a couple of years ago that we established to clean up our charter to get it to align with state law. So we probably will revive that committee in the next month or so to focus on that. That requires a vote of the people, however. To make any change to the charter requires a vote, even if it's not a substantive change, even if it's getting it in line with state law, that still requires a vote of the people. So it's a process. The council consists of a mayor and 4 council persons. To be on council, one must be an elector of the city, a resident for at least 2 years, and not in default to the city. All have an equal vote at the table with regards to making motions and voting on policies, resolutions, and ordinances. Council members cannot hold office for more than 3 consecutive terms. They have to wait a term out before they run again. The mayor presides as chair of the council, may vote as same as other council members. Some of the mayor's duties compared to council members are not significant, but they include authenticating, documents, service and process, ceremonial purposes, military law. So it's really the main purpose is to run the meeting, to act as the chair of the meeting, but they also sign some bills and other things like that. As mentioned, the city council is the legislative body of the city. It has the authority to exercise all powers granted to it by the charter and the state law. These include, as mentioned, resolutions and ordinances. But the other big responsibility is adopting a budget and levying property taxes. These are known as the policy forming powers. This picture is from last year. Thanks, Bonnie.
Yeah. You're welcome.
You're welcome. City manager role and authority. So chapters 4, 7, and 8 of the city charter, as well as chapter 2, article 1 of the city code, discuss the primary powers, duties, and responsibilities of the city manager. The council appoints the city manager, and the city manager serve at the pleasure of the council. City council can remove the city manager at will by a majority vote, except that a 4/5 majority is needed to remove the city manager during 6 months following an election. What are the main duties of the city manager? Well, it's first of all to manage and supervise city departments, public improvements and work, ensures that all laws and ordinances are enforced, attends council meetings and has a right to speak equal to council members, but not a right to vote, and can appoint and remove all administrative officers and employees. So that's the administrative side where the council is the policy making side. So council approves the budget and tasks the city manager with spending that budget appropriately within the budget's confines. The city manager also recommends changes in ordinances as he deems necessary. Acts as a purchasing agent for the city, but as mentioned, cannot exceed the budget without council approval. Can approve contracts for repairs and improvements, advises the council on desirability of new contracts or construction projects, and submits the annual budget to council for review and adoption. This is probably hard to see for most people, but in the packet, you probably can read it. This is just a staff structure. Sorry, this is a structure of our policy forming branch of government as well as administrative part. So on your left part of the screen, you'll see a bunch of boards. You see the mayor, the citizens at the top with the mayor and council below that. To the left of that is all our boards and commissions. And then to the right of that, you have below the mayor and council, you have the city manager and all the staff that he oversees. And we'll get into those a little bit. The clerk treasurer position, that is Nick Whitaker. Obviously, he's not here. He's also acts as a comptroller. They technically are two separate administrative officer positions in our charter, but our charter also allows them to be combined into one position. And there's not many clerk treasurer positions in the state. Petoskey used to have one, but just recently they split theirs back up into two because it was difficult to find qualified people who can and will want to do both. Like the city manager, the clerk is appointed by council. The clerk is considered the comptroller and chief accounting officer, and it's responsible for the city's accounting and financial reporting. This is why the city clerk and the city manager work very closely together on presenting the budget to council, because, well, it's really the manager's budget to present to council. It's really the clerk, the comptroller who knows the budget in and out and the finances in and out. Clerk also manages elections, signs ordinances and resolutions, and is responsible for meeting minutes and administrative oaths. He acts independent of the city manager in regards to his comptroller duties, but reports to the city manager for all other duties. That's as laid out in the city charter. The treasurer is also appointed by city council. Ours is a clerk treasurer role as mentioned, but if it was a separate, the treasurer's functions would include custody of all city money, collect all money owed to the city, such as taxes, fines, license fees, etc. So who works for the clerk treasurer? We have Deputy Clerk Accounts Payable Patty Sutton, who I think has been here about 28 years, a little bit over. Deputy Treasurer / Cashier, Tina Honeysett. She used to be the utility billing assistant, but moved recently in the front. And our new hire, Becky Alkema, who's our utility billing assistant / accounts receivable. Public Works is led by Lucas Vanderzee, who's in the front row there. This department was established by a city ordinance, so it's in the city code. It oversees the water, streets, building and grounds, as well as electric, which is something we changed about a couple of years ago. Electric used to be separate from DPW, and we put electric under DPW, so we have more organizational structure there. Specifically, this is an important one, is charged with the design, construction, improvement, maintenance, and repair of streets, sidewalks, alleys, boardwalks, beaches, public highways, and appurtenances thereof, drains, ditches, culverts, streams, and water courses, docks, boulevards, parks, and other public places. So there's a large breadth of public property and infrastructure that the DPW is in charge of designing, constructing, and improving, as well as maintaining. The electric department, which is a big department, falls under the DPW, was established by ordinance and later incorporated under the DPW. by resolution in 2019 after retirements and restructuring. Again, similar to DPW, they're tasked with the design and construction, but only of the electric system. And also they deal with the generation or purchase of electric energy. We don't generate our own energy except for the solar panels we have on some city buildings. So most of our energy is purchased, as we'll see later, through the MPPA, which is the Michigan Public Power Agency. Public Works staff, we have some changes here, but Daniel Gasco and Brad Baldwin are DPW foreman, Jeff Duntley, Joe Warner, Josh Warner, John Crizel. Our newest hire is Daniel Huey Jr. Electric department, we have Daniel Huey Sr., who's electric department supervisor, Jimmy Honeysett, John Maryhew, Greg Lastly, and Matt Hendricks, who's our apprentice, who used to be in the streets, water, well, buildings and grounds, and then transferred over a few months ago to electric department. Police chief is Kyle Knight. This position was created by the charter. The department was established by ordinance. So it's one thing to keep in mind is that we had a police chief by charter, but the department was established by ordinance. So the police chief is charged with the preservation of the peace and order of the city, with the protection of inhabitants from personal violence, etc. Excuse me. Full-time police officers include Josh Johnson, Tyler Swiss, Tyler Hoff, Nick Strabel, and then Matt Howell and Spencer Bishop are two newer hires. With Spencer Bishop having started about 3 months ago, yeah. Our administrative assistant in the police department is Emily Britton. Our assessor and zoning administrator and also planning coordinator is Jeff Grimm, who's back there. As an assessor, he's appointed by council. His duties are to estimate the value of property and place those valuation on the roll, assessment roll. He staffs the board of review and does all the clerical work for us. Well, sorry, all the clerical work is handled by the clerk's office. He's also serves as zoning administrator. It's appointed by council as well. Administers and enforces the zoning code. He also assists in our structure because we have smaller staff. He assists the city manager and the clerk with city code enforcement. As a planning coordinator, he coordinates the planning commission meetings and reviews planning submissions for completeness and discusses planning issues with applicants and residents. Our city attorney to the left of me is Jim Raymer. It's allowed for by city charter. The position was also established by ordinance. He acts as the city's official legal advisor and counsel for all official matters related to their official duties. Either the council, the city manager, or the clerk may request a legal opinion from the attorney in regards to their powers and duties. All other staff members or members of the public have to go through us for any kind of opinion from the lawyer. Marine and Recreation, I think Mike Johnson is here, but Michael Johnson has been our harbor master for several years now. Established by city code, appointed by city manager and oversees the harbor master staff, which is a part-time staff. Enforces laws and rules of the harbor, responsible for preparation of data that presents to the Harbor Commission and controls activity at the city marina. The Parks Director position was established by resolution in 2020. Appointed by the city manager and oversees park staff. For the part-time park staff, we have a skate park, Kiwanis Parks Grounds, and lifeguards. As mentioned, oversees the parks, grounds, and assets, creates and coordinates programming, develops and implements parks plans, as well as applies for grants for the Parks and Recreation. Some other positions we have, these are contractual. Our city planner is John Icoangeli. We contract with Beckett and Rader, but John Icoangeli is Beckett and Rader's staff for our planning commission. They're the ones who actually reviews the submissions and advises the planning commission and staff on planning and zoning issues and makes recommendations. Our city engineer is Benchmark. They provide our engineering services for public works projects as well as surveying. Our city arborist is Ben Vealing, advises city manager and the tree board on the management of the city's tree inventory. We have a city IT consultant, Andy Frank, serves as support for our information technology. DDA director is Margot DeMoose. It's hired and managed by the Downtown Development Authority Board for the improvement of the downtown district. And then we have our fire chief, John Cups, which is established by charter as an officer of the city, appointed by city manager officially. So let's get to the budget and funds and millages. And so the timeline for the budget is in October, November, the manager and the clerks begin preparing the budget for next year, as well as amending the current year's budget. And the first Monday in December, which will be December 5th, we present the budget to council. The second Monday in December, there's a council meeting just to hold a public hearing on that budget. And third Monday in December, which will be the 19th, I believe, is when council will take all that feedback and make any requested changes to that budget and vote to approve a budget. A budget must be adopted before the new year. It includes itemized estimates of expenditures and revenues, contains supporting explanations for any significant changes from the prior year, or explains away any trends, describes the status of city bonds and debts, and explains the current status of the city funds. So the different funds we have within our budget are the general fund. That's our major tax revenue fund. So that goes to support our police, fire, our city hall staff and services such as the clerk, manager, the zoning and assessing, parks, buildings and grounds, recycling, brush and leaf pickup, legal, most legal, not all legal, IT, engineering and planning services. The general fund revenue, again, mostly comes from property taxes, which accounts for a little over half the revenue of the fund. It also includes administrative fees. Those are transfer-ins from other city budget, city funds, license application fees, sales and use tax from the state, recreation fees, and donations and grants. Our other funds include major street fund, local street fund, fire authority, Blackbird Museum, DDA, electric, water, sewer, waterfront, and equipment. The street funds are funded by state contributions and our local millage. The DDA is funded by the tax increment finance capture, as well as special assessment on downtown properties. And electric and waterfront are enterprise funds, meaning they're essentially business funds. Our millages, so property taxes for the city, county, school, college, and cemetery are all collected by the city. We don't keep all that money, but we collect it on behalf and then distribute their portion of their tax dollars to them. For a homestead resident or a resident with a principal residential exemption, only about 24% of the taxes on their bill go to the city. The rest goes to those other entities. This year, actually, currently the city has 3 villages now. Operating millage, which was about 5.69 for 2022. That had decreased from 7.9 in 1991 and had every year since 2015 when it was at 6.2 mils, which is one of the reasons why we tried a couple of times for the Henley and Proposal A, which I won't get into here, but is a reason why that millage rate keeps on going down as property values go up. Street millage was passed in 2017. We began collecting 1 mil in 2018. For 2022, I should say, was at 0.93 mils. It is also affected by Headley. A public safety millage was just passed in 2022, and we will begin collecting our 1 mil next year. That also too will be affected by Headley. That millage is for 5 years, the public safety one. I move on to ordinances and resolutions. Ordinances are approved by majority vote of council. However, if it's an ordinance that relates to the zoning code or zoning issues, it must be approved through a public hearing by the planning commission. Ordinances apply to everyone in the city. They usually carry a penalty if there's any violation of those ordinances. We publish those in a newspaper after adoption. And the charter does provide a way for residents to initiate an ordinance by petition. So if they get so many signatures, they can present to council or the clerk to get on a next ballot. Resolutions, really like motions, any other non-ordinance decision that council makes aside from contractual stuff, the ordinances are also approved by majority vote of council. They are related to the internal affairs, usually of city government. Sometimes other special resolutions come up. No specific language for resolutions are needed unless a specific city ordinance or the charter calls for specific language in a resolution. The Open Meetings Act. This was established in 1976 as a way to make government more accountable and foster openness in decision-making. This applies to all public bodies with decision-making powers. Some of the basic requirements are that public must be given notice of meetings. That the schedule of meetings must be published at the beginning of each year. Notices must contain the city's name, contact information, meeting location, and meeting time. Notices must be posted at city's principal office and website. What we do, we publish lists of our meetings in the first week of January as the OMA requires. I go above that by including all of our agenda items on the notice. That's pretty standard in a lot of cities. We also post our agenda on social media, the IGA, now the Harbor Springs Market, and the post office. In addition to here at City Hall, we also started putting notices in the Harbor Light, and we have an email list for people to receive agendas. All decisions, as mentioned, must be made in a public meeting. 3/5 of the, in our case, must be council members must be present to have a vote or to have a meeting. So we cannot discuss city business if there are 3 council members present, but a meeting hasn't been noticed. So anytime there's more than 2 council members in a room, if they begin talking about something that might be or was or is on an agenda, that could be considered a violation of the Open Meetings Act. Social gatherings, however, chance encounters and conferences are exempt from that. So if all of you are at a restaurant together, it's, happen to be there by chance, that doesn't constitute a violation of the Open Meetings Act. One member of council can canvass other members individually outside of the meeting. So you guys can talk to each other one-on-one, so long as there's just no decision being made outside of that meeting. Emailing and texting other council members about city business during meetings also violate the Open Meetings Act. There is an opportunity for council to go in closed session. That's usually to talk about personnel issues, strategy and negotiation related collective bargaining, considering the purchase of purchase or lease of real property, and consulting with the attorney regarding trial and settlement strategy. There's also some other ones that are a little more nuanced and less used. The closed session must be conducted during the course of an open meeting. So you have to go into an open meeting first, then call a closed session, get out of closed session, and then close the open meeting. Decisions, however, can only be made in open session. So no votes can be held in closed session. City staff can attend closed session, as well as council can request any private citizens attend if necessary and if appropriate. No one can be excluded from a public meeting except for a breach of peace at the specific meeting. Council, and this applies to actually all boards, cannot require people to sign in to attend the meeting. Council can establish rules. Doesn't mean we can't ask them to, but we just can't require them to. Council can establish rules for speaking at a public meeting, which we have. Council can establish time limits for public comments. Our meetings require individuals give their name and address before their comments. Our meetings also limit public comment to 3 minutes. As mentioned, a quorum of council is needed 3/5 on a vote. A member who has a conflict of interest cannot be counted as part of that quorum for that particular issue. A motion must be made by one member and supported by another member before holding a vote. Abstaining to a vote from a matter which a member does not have a conflict of interest has the same effect as a no vote. And usually we consult our city attorney when we suspect that there may be a conflict of interest, or if we're unsure if there's a conflict of interest. A tie vote means a motion failed. No proxy voting allowed. That means you can't have another member vote in your place or someone from the public vote in your place. Roll call votes are recommended for matters of significance, such as large contracts and ordinances. However, there's no set state standard on when we do roll call or when we don't do roll call. Council meeting structure, as mentioned, is the first third Mondays of the month, usually at 7 p.m. Sometimes we change that if there's a election the day after, or if if there's a holiday. We can't usually cancel that Monday meeting. However, a special meeting can be called either by the mayor alone or the written request of 2 council members. Our meetings have almost always been held at City Hall. We now live stream them on Zoom and YouTube. Agenda structure, as you see, citizen comments for comment that's not on the agenda. Consent agenda, this is approval of items that do not necessarily need discussion, and this is usually after some coordination between the mayor and the city manager. Guesswork as which items are pretty much standard to approve. However, any council member can request to take an item out of consent agenda and put into discussion item if they feel they want to have a discussion on it. Discussion items are those that we feel need at least some deliberation. There's a city manager report, report on administrative affairs in the city, boards and commissions, or reports either of the boards and commissions or appointment of members to those boards. And then city council or the new business. This is where if a council member wants to bring up something new to discuss at a future council meeting or to talk about something that happened at a previous council meeting. We have rules of order that govern how council conducts its meetings. It should be adopted when the new council term begins after election. And citizen comments rules are a subsection of those rules. As mentioned, we have 3 minutes to speak per citizen. They must be recognized by the mayor before speaking, must direct their comments at council and not engage in debate or discussion with other citizens. Council is not obligated to answer any questions. Council can discuss the public comments during their discussion should they choose. For example, if someone makes a comment, you don't need to respond to them during the comment session or answer the question, but you can choose during your discussion to answer their question or discuss the comment that they brought up. All right, we're getting to the end here. There are boards and commissions. We have several. Planning Commission, it's created by state law as well as our city code, decides on site plans and special land uses. It updates the master plan and approves zoning ordinances. The Zoning Board of Appeals, as well established by state law in our code, hears appeals from the Planning Commission and the zoning or appeals from the zoning administrator decisions. It also decides on variances. Our Harbor Commission advises council on matters connected with the operation, supervision, improvement, and maintenance of the harbor, as written in our code. We have a tree advisory board that assists the council and manager with tree management, education, or outreach with tree benefits, tree policies, and maintaining and improving our city's urban forests. Downtown Development Authority, also known as the DDA, it's also has the principal shopping district is also another name attached to that, but we call it DDA for short. It really analyzes the impact of economic changes in the downtown. Strives to promote orderly economic growth in downtown and implements a development plan, which we had just approved at council a few meetings ago. The Parks and Recreation Board, which was established recently to assist the Parks Department in planning and managing their parks and recreation programs, as well as advising council and the Parks Department on recreation issues. Finally, we have a Board of Review, which hears protests from taxpayers on assessed property values, as well as settles protests of assessment and corrects clerical errors. 2 committees these are temporary committees that aren't full on boards. They don't have powers to make decisions. They have no authority whatsoever. They only exist to make a recommendation to council or staff. The Noise Control Committee was formed this fall just to look into noise issues throughout the city. They will make recommendations to council on how to address any noise issues and whether through outreach or city code changes. We have the RRC, or the Redevelopment Ready Community Committee, was established in 2019 to push the city forward in economic development and redevelopment, as well as best practices. COVID-19 and other city priorities put the RRC process on pause. It was reignited in early 2022. And finally, our regional boards and other organizations. We are a member of the Michigan Municipal League, which advocates for municipalities and provides resources for our government personnel. Our Fire Authority, which oversees the fire department for the city, as well as is combined with, it also includes, the authority also includes West Traverse, Little Traverse, and Pleasant View townships. Similarly, our Airport Authority looks over our airport, right? It's in the city of Harbor Springs is a member, as well as Petoskey, Little Traverse, West Traverse, Bear Creek, and Pleasant View townships. We own the land, the airport land that we lease to the Airport Authority. So the city owns that land, we lease it to the authority, and that land is in Little Traverse Township, it is not in the city of Harbor Springs. We are also a member of, well, it's not on here. It's the Harbor Springs Sewer Authority. Sorry for I neglected to put that one on there. No one wants to remember that one. Sorry guys. The Sewer Authority is it's a landslide in the city of Harbor Springs, Little Traverse Township, Bear Creek Township. And again, it oversees the wastewater system in the city and all those townships. We are a member of the Michigan Public Power Agency, which with the 2 other dozen members that are part of it, we develop, acquire, and manage our energy assets and services, as well as essentially that means purchasing energy for the city. The MMEA, the Michigan Municipal Electric Association, it provides communication, legislative, and educational services for our electric department. And finally, Central Dispatcher Authority 911, it oversees dispatch and emergency operations for Charlevoix, Sheboygan, and Emmett County. So I know that was a lot in one presentation, but I think it gives a good overview of our governance structure. There's a lot more details to it. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Or comments.
I don't know if this is the right time. One thing about public comment, the way our agendas are set up, We've talked off and on about possibly putting all our public comment at the beginning of the meeting and not doing it per agenda item. I'd love for staff to just take a look and see what communities do it that way. Some of them do, and kind of compare the two. I think it might make the meeting flow a little better sometimes, but if we could do that in the next, whenever you guys have time to check on it, that would be great.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
It might help make meetings more efficient.
Are you
Thank-
saying public comment at the beginning of the entire meeting?
Yeah.
Instead of after each, how does it work now? Is it you present each agenda item and then people have a chance to comment?
Correct.
Is that how it works?
Correct. That's the way it works
Okay.
now.
I
And it's
just wonder with your suggestion, if people don't have an opportunity to hear what you are presenting, how do they get to comment? You know, how can you comment before the presentation is
well, lots of
actually
times
made?
public comment is taken before council talks about it.
That's why I just asked, is it made before or asked after you talk
It
about it?
depends on what the mayor.
Well, and all of the information that we would deliberate on is part of the package
Is part of
that's
the
released
package.
prior to every meeting.
Yeah.
So you would have access to the same information that we would have.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, it just seems like you would want to hear people's reactions to what you're presenting after you present it. And I know it's not going to always be exactly what's on the written page and to have to kind of anticipate what you're going to say. I understand there's going to be something in writing, but I think that kind of disconnects the citizens of Harbor Springs from the process. It's like how I'm going to comment. I might have some opinions before the meeting, but they might change by what, depending on what you discuss.
But many times public comment for the agenda item is before we discuss it.
Okay,
So, you would, many times that's the way it's done. It depends on what the mayor decides.
Right.
okay, yeah, that's what I.
So it's just something I'd like him to take a look at and see so we can compare, because we've talked about it several times. And we haven't really done any
Yeah.
research to see how.
And we've
it's worked.
benefited in the past for looking at what other municipalities do and how they run their meetings. So it's purely, all we're saying is we're requesting that staff look into it.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just my comment is I think
Thanks.
it would disconnect
Correct.
the process. It's kind of hard to make a comment at the very beginning and have things presented, I think,
But
from my
again,
perspective.
again, it's public comment on the topic,
Yeah.
not necessarily
reaction to-
public comment on our deliberations or on our decisions. So I don't think
Okay.
there would be anything lost, but again, this is investigation.
Yeah, it's just I'd like to know what other folks do.
And this is a good example, I will say, of a back and forth that
Yeah.
that happens when
really
we
is a-
get into this
Right.
question gets answered. Not saying there's anything wrong with it, I'm just saying this is an example of how meetings sometimes do get inefficient because it turns into a back and forth. So I'll look into it.
Yeah,
whatever
if you
municipalities
just,
do.
that would be great. That would be great.
Get back to what you want.
I think it's a great idea on an annual basis, just after elections, to kind of have a reminder of how we run things and what the structure is. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks.
Any questions?
Jamie? Okay.
All right, we can move on. And I'm sorry, I've been losing my voice a little here, so I will not talk too much. Is Matt Rodell here? Yes, you are. All right, there you are. Great. So I'm gonna introduce this first. Several years ago, it was brought to MDOT's attention and our attention that the culvert under M119 might, be in its last stages, I guess, of doing what it's supposed to be doing. And so they approached the city earlier this year, MDOT did, with reconstructing that culvert under M119 that leads to our property, the south side of M119. While this property is our property, it's city-owned property, it's not property that's within the city limits. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's just east of the city limits, across from the school fields. The state has been engineering a fix for this culvert for several years. Essentially, they want to save the integrity of the road by creating a larger culvert that can handle the existing water flow, but also from larger flood events so that the road does not give way. Even though the culvert is larger, from my understanding, and we do have an MDOT representative, Matt Rodelsky here, the culvert is larger, they will not be moving more water than normal or moving it to a new location. They're essentially changing its capacity to prepare for a large rain flood event. So to construct this larger culvert, the state needs an easement over city property. Basically, they need use some of our property to build that culvert. It would require them to remove vegetation. Council had originally expressed some concerns about replanting that vegetation and the detour route. After review by our tree board, MDOT agreed to plant and maintain trees. MDOT will plant 90 trees, which they will take into account a higher mortality rate. And so they would expect several of those to die. So that way, at least we can have perhaps 40 or 50 that actually are successfully grown. They will water and maintain those trees for 2 years. We also worked on a detour route that was both acceptable for the city and MDOT. Further, this fall, the MDOT's appraiser appraised the property, determined that the easement was worth about $1,200, and there was a consent to grade that's worth about $660. Jeff Grimm, our city assessor, accompanied that appraiser during his appraisal, reviewed the report and agreed with his findings essentially that, that's about how much the property easement was worth. MDOT is now requesting that we sign an easement because MDOT is fairly compensating us for the property and work with the city on an appropriate detour route. And we will replant and maintain the trees as requested. We feel the city should sign those agreements. We did receive a correspondence at last council meeting, which is why this one has been moved to this one. We originally had this in consent agenda about the city trying to perhaps get some sort of indemnification clause into that easement. We did approach MDOT with asking for an indemnification clause. They said they would not put that in there. So we tried, and now we have this open meeting, so at least we can discuss about it openly. I'll just before we go pass it on to Matt, if he has any to talk a little bit more about the project. Our city charter says that the real estate or any interest therein of value that doesn't exceed $2,000 should not be sold except by the affirmative vote of 4 members of council. So for our charter purposes, it requires a 4-member vote. In reality, if the state needs the property, I don't think they want to go down that route. We know nobody wants does, but they can take the property if they need it for legitimate government purpose. Our city charter also says that for property over $2,000, it must go to vote with the city people. Sorry, on the city residents electors. So we're not at that $2,000 level.
So that would also apply to this easement. The easement is the interest in the property.
Yes, so any interest.
2,000, it would have to go.
Well, in this case, with it being a state, I'm not sure exactly how that would work out, but theoretically, yes, based on what our charter says. Our charter doesn't distinguish between selling to a private or a state, so. But I do have some, a map of the location, so Matt, I don't know if you appreciate you being here, I know you've been busy. Just want to give a little overview. Sure. I also have the plan here.
Okay. Do you happen to have a plug I can plug into the projector to show some other pictures or?
Yeah, I do. Excuse me. Just press that. Yeah, it's going.
Okay. All right, good evening. I'm Matt Radolski. I apologize for my attire. I've been out in the field all day today working through the snow and everything, so I came right here, so I apologize for it. But I'm the project manager on this job. This is our M119 culvert project. And I want to go through a couple pictures here so that you can see the reason why we're doing this project. So as you can see, M119's up at the top. This the culvert is outlet. This is the culvert outlet. This is on the south side of the bluff. And as you can see in here, it's kind of hard to see, which is that big cavity in there. And a lot of these rocks are unstable. And what's happening is up on M119, the shoulder is starting to cave in, and our maintenance crews have been up there a few times to patch it in and to make sure it stays secure. And as Victor said earlier, and our crews have noticed too, that yeah, this has been a big concern of ours. And we've been quite worried about it collapsing. And I got some other pictures to go in a little bit detail. Oops. There's another one. So as you can see, it's kind of hard to see right over here. There's a separate tube that was connected to the pipe there. But that is detached. It just deteriorated so much that we cannot keep it together. So that's another reason why we're working on this project. I guess to go back. So what we looked at is, you know, up here where the red is, this is where, actually, that's not the right photo. I need another photo. That's not the right location. Sorry about that. So we'll go back to here. So a little bit more in detail, as you can see, all the soil loss, you know, some of the rocks are starting to fall down. And then, you know, as you get further down, you can see where this soil loss is happening. And then, just again, you know, you can really see the condition of the pipe. It's just, there's nothing there, holding it together. This is a little bit further downstream, and as you can see, the wooden poles, some of them have broke, and some of them are on the verge of busting open here. It's kind of like an earth dam, and we're afraid too that that's going to break open and cause some slope stabilization and some soil erosion issues. Just another kind of look. And as you can see up here, there's the waterfall coming from the outlet over underneath M119, you know, comes down into here. It's almost kind of like a nice little wedding picture background. So no, it's not. Just another view of the earth dam below. Just another video of where we can see that the attached pipe has been moved over to the right. It's just we couldn't keep it connected. And as you can see here in the photo, you got various tiers and it's starting to erode away and eat closer and closer to M119. And this is what we're getting worried about. All right, let me just go back to this picture. Here we go. Okay. So up in the yellow, that shows where the culvert is. And the red is approximately the existing course right now. We are replacing the culvert in the same exact spot. We're not creating anything new. So it basically kind of follows that general water course that heads out towards Lake Michigan. So, so here's another view of the two green lines. That's the M119 right away. Shows where the timber structure was. The existing culvert is up there, the yellow box there, and just kind of gives you just kind of an overall view and a topographic view of what's going on here. Just kind of another view that we modeled. And then we go into some of the plans here. Get back when the Victor was showing. Is this one, Victor?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're doing up at the top, we're removing the existing 15-inch pipe, replacing it with a 42-inch pipe, goes into a catch basin, and then heads across the road underneath heads into another catch basin. And then it heads down this U-shaped channel. It's kind of like open on the top, but there's a grate on top so that, no kids, nobody can get inside and hurt themselves. But it's able for us to come in and maintain it just in case something were to get caught. Usually about, say once a year, the existing 15-inch culvert gets plugged with all golf balls from the neighboring golf course. So we try to keep it cleaned out. But if it were you get one of those historic rains, which we seem to get more and more of these historic rains up here. With that culvert plugging up right now, the water will come, our models show that it'll topple the road. And it could be more catastrophic failures to what we're doing right now, and probably cost the taxpayers a lot more money than what we're spending to build this. So, you could possibly have M119 go under, and a lot of slope failures. If you thought the slope failure at M119 in Harrison was big, this would be bigger. So, it's not the scale. There we go. So you see the top left-hand corner. This is exaggerated. But there's a culvert up the top, kind of goes down through this U-shaped channel. As you can see, it's a little bit steeper at the top, kind of comes down, gets shallower and shallower and shallower, comes into this the filling basin. It slows the water down. The distilling basin kind of goes down and then comes back up. So the water stabilizes and then slowly releases out down onto the existing the path that the water is in right now. There is a wetlands that pictures here. So kind of to the right, at the top right, when the water comes down and you got that U-shaped channel comes down, there's a little bit of a kind of a swampy area, or like a little bit of a wetland, and it's just kind of standing water, maybe 6 to 8 inches deep, and then that's what it's going to be released into prior to following the tributary down out into Lake Michigan. There they are. So you can see here a little bit different picture. This is like a profile view where you can see the water kind of goes into this little distilling basin here that settles down and then just kind of slowly creeps out into the wetland area. So anything else to point out? I wanted to show you the trees real quick. So this is the tree plan. As Victor talked about, we're planting about 90 trees, and we're benching in the slope. So you're gonna have a slope, gonna be like a flat area, another slope, and a flat area, and then on these flat areas are where we can plant the trees. So it's about 140 feet long. I think the bluff is 150 or no 50 feet tall, and that way it kind of just gives a gradual. We're trying to make the slope a little bit more gradual than what it is, because right now it's like at almost like a one-on-one in some parts, and that's why we're getting some soil loss. We're trying to make it to 1-on-2 if we can. Some parts we got to go to like a 1 and 1.5 because of the steepness and just to match in with the rest of it. So that way we don't take as much land. We're trying to lessen the amount of land that we needed to build this. And I just want to go up to the easement again real quick. Okay. So the temporary grading permit is about 140 feet long, 210 feet wide. And so that's just basically so our contractor can get in there, basically build the U channel in there, build the slope, and restore it to more of a little bit gradual slope. The reason we need a little bit more land on this side than that side is because of just it's a little bit steeper over here. We needed to kind of pan out a little bit so we can try to flatten the grades a little bit more. And then we're asking for a permanent easement. So basically permanent land that MDOT will own, which is 30-foot wide, probably about 120 feet long. And it's basically so we can get in there and maintain it, anything like sticks and stones or something like that were to clog it. We can go in there and pull that stuff out.
I think that was good. Matt, can you really quickly, because I didn't have the camera turned on to the screen. If you-
Sure.
Just some of those pictures, just scroll through them.
Yeah.
For people that are watching on Zoom, but I don't know if council wants to discuss that. That's just, he flips that. but-
But just to clarify, it is an easement, so the city retains ownership of the land. They just have an easement to maintain it, right?
The city would retain ownership. That's correct, John.
MDOT will maintain it, control.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, this is, the existing outlet. You want to go through and describe?
That's fine. Because I didn't turn the camera on to the screen soon enough, so that's fine. I just want some pictures up there so people on Zoom can see.
There's still no camera on it.
There is. Anyway, we can switch over now.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Now, just to clarify, so when you're done, how long is this gonna take, the project from start to finish?
We're gonna start it as soon as possible, as soon as the weather clears. I think usually around April, we're aiming for it. And we're gonna try to have a majority of it done by Memorial Day weekend, with a little bit of cleanup work. And afterwards, for the tree plantings and some of the soil restoration, will be after Memorial Day weekend. But the bulk of the work will be done prior to Memorial Day weekend.
Will the detour of the road be 100% shut down where you have your traffic light directing traffic through?
Yep, we're gonna have 3 traffic signals up, one on each side, and then another one in the middle to control Park Lane there.
Yep.
So, so it'd be alternating traffic.
Yeah, pretty similar to what I've seen throughout Emmett County, Chippewa County.
Yeah.
All year.
And based on your
Culvert
description, once it's done, once you get down to the basin at the bottom, the water flow, the dynamics are gonna be exactly the same as they are today.
That's correct. One might think that, okay, we're increasing the size of the culvert from 15 inches to 42 inches. It's not, it's just the amount of water, there's only less than 2 square acres that are the drainage area. It's a very small drainage area, compared to the other drainage areas in here, around here. There, as you know, there's several springs or several seepages out of the slope. In fact, I was looking at the soil borings right before the meeting here. Found water within like 1.5 to 2 feet below the surface all the way down. So it's just, there's water coming out all over that slope. And so yeah, ultimately, what we're trying to do is, right now, is if we were not to do anything, either A, the water will topple M119 and go right down the slope anyways, or B, I mean, if you get this significant storm, 100-year storm, 500-year storm, only so much can go through that, and it's gonna topple over anyways. So it's kind of, we were really debated if we should be doing an emergency, a maintenance fix. And fortunately, so far, it's worked out since we've been doing this, this design. We've had a lot of people involved. We've actually we got a consultant on board to help us out design it, to make sure that we're looking at all of our numbers and just to double check all of our calculations and everything. So we feel very confident that this culvert in the system is going to work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Any other question? Do you need from us a motion?
Well, I would first ask, I'm sorry, any public comment?
Any public comment on the project?
Shirley Snyder, 106 Fawn Run. Where does all this water start from? That's coming down. And my concern is there's a creek that's right by my office, which is at 2670 Pennsylvania. That rises,
Mhm,
you know, when the snow starts melting.
mhm.
So where is all this additional water coming from?
It comes from snow melt, and then also from there, yeah, there is a creek there. There's an existing creek right there, right now as we speak. It's from various water seeping through the soil. There is a clay layer down, probably about 8 feet or so. And so the water can't penetrate that clay layer. So it's all kind of coming to that little bit of a low spot, which is the creek. And same thing with snow melt, you know, the snow, it'll melt, but then it kind of all comes into that creek area. And then through the culvert underneath that one.
But again, to clarify, this project doesn't create any additional volume.
That's
It's just to protect the roadway. The same volume of water is going to come under the road and go where it's going today.
Okay, so there's not gonna be any more additional water.
No,
Most of that water's coming from ground springs up off
Is there anybody on Zoom who has questions? I know we lost audio. If you do have a comment or question, please raise your hand. So yeah, so then the request for council is to approve the good faith or authorize the city manager to sign the good faith letter. Authorized to sign the easement as well as the consent to grade.
Any questions or other issues? Would someone like to make a motion?
No, so I just got one question actually for him. What, are you bringing most of the equipment in from up above? Or will you have to go through Gilwood Weekly to come in by the tennis courts?
Bring everything up top.
Everything come from up top? I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
I'll second.
Do a roll call.
Yeah.
So we have a motion by Councilmember Cox to sign the good faith letter, the easement as well as the consent to grade, the easement at a value of $1,200 and the consent to grade at a value of $660. And we had a second by Councilmember Rondell.
Yeah.
All right. Jamie Melky. Nancy Rondell,
Yeah.
John Leo,
Yes.
and John Cox.
Yes.
Motion passed. And if others, if people want to contact me, if Matt, you mind, I can give your email to them. I know I've given your email to others, so if you have further questions for MDOT, I will pass on your email to Matt Radulski. Thanks again, Matt. All right, moving on to item 3C. At the October Harbor Commission meeting, the Harbor Commission recommended that the city hire a full-time seasonal marine patrol officer to provide full-time presence on the water. This would be in addition to some of the part-time marine law enforcement activities that we do. And this would be during the summer months, likely probably from middle, late June through early mid-September, depending on the season. The Harbor Commission reasoned that a full-time presence would deter rule breakers, allow the city to better enforce the harbor rules and regulations, such as our wake zone rules. Further, a full-time marine officer would and could educate or inform boaters about the rules and hand out informational material, etc. Finally, with a boat constantly on the water, it's probably it would be better during the busier time of day. It would be more likely the city can have a faster response time in case of emergencies. As Chief Knight alluded to or talked about earlier this year, we had a couple emergencies on the water and our boats arrived there. It's a good, it's a good thing to have quicker response for people on the bay. We discussed this with Chief Knight. We don't see an issue with hiring a seasonal marine patrol officer. We expect, I mean, we're not sure, it depends on the hourly rate and how many hours the officer works, that it would be between $10,000 and $15,000 annually for this position. This would all come from the waterfront budget. That means we all come from the revenue we receive from boaters and people using our waterfront. It wouldn't be a tax funded position. We'll talk about this probably more at budget season, but right now we currently have about $30,000 in that marine law enforcement budget item, that budget line. That is a comment. We also put some of our foot patrol that's part-time that we use in that budget due to increased boaters, using the waterfront. So we have increased foot patrol that we spend about probably, I don't know, $8,000, Kyle, or so a year on that. So this would probably, even though it's going to be $15,000 annually, we eliminated that part-time position. So this $30,000 included a position that was eliminated. So probably we won't see much more than $30,000, probably $35,000 as a budget item for this, as opposed to $30,000 plus $15,000. Again, though, we still don't know based on who we find for that position, the hourly rate, and when we cement down some hours for that person. And I don't know, Chairman Jim, the Harbor Commission, and Mark Jim Bible say if he wants to add anything, but I think I summarized what the purpose was. Okay.
What he said?
What do you say?
Any other comments from Chief Knight?
Just so, and Jim will confirm this is not a request from the police department. Like the last thing I want people to think is because of village pass that I'm asking for it. Not coming from the police department, correct?
No, I came off the Harbor Commission.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, oh, now we got the village, we're asking for more people. This was.
No, but this
That's also not coming out of tax dollars.
It's not coming out of tax dollars.
I just want to make sure that, I mean, I'm sure you two have talked and that you're okay with it.
Yeah.
This is the time to bring it up.
This is in addition to what Officer Cousins' normal patrol would be. I spoke with Victor earlier. Based on the $20,000 that we currently have budgeted, he could work approximately $900. This last year, he worked 302 hours. And so this addition of the full-time officer will supplement his hours.
I think it's a great idea.
I was there for the discussion.
I was too.
It was-
I think it's a great
The
idea.
whole board, was excited about it, so
Well,
I
make it
think it's a good
safer,
idea.
make it safer out there. And I think that's important, obviously.
Yeah.
So,
Education and deterrence.
Strongly in favor,
yeah, it makes sense.
and we have.
Yeah.
Public comment.
Any public comments on the proposal? Anyone online? No. So you need from us,
I would like probably a motion to authorize up to $15,000 and up to $15,000 extra in budgeting for this marine law enforcement. It might not be $15,000 when we come to the actual, when we come to budget, when we come and present the budget to council, but if we can authorize up to $15,000 and we'll do that in the budget if need be less.
I'll make that motion. I think,
that's a
do
good
you need
idea.
me to repeat it?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye,
Aye.
opposed? Next,
Sorry, I've been reading chats. I'm trying to play cameraman and read the packet, so I apologize for those on Zoom. Usually we have the city clerk doing the ones.
I'm not a good multitasker, I guess.
Thank you for your support.
Yeah, thank you.
thank you for what
We'll
you
work
do.
all good.
All right, item 3D is dock and dredge license. In October, the Harbor Commission again agreed to renew dock and dredge's license to operate its barge from Ford Park, which it operates in the spring and the fall to install and remove city docks, private docks, et cetera. The first license, I think, was for 1 year back in 2020. The second license approved in 2021 was for 2 years. And the updated license agreement as recommended by the Harbor Commission includes changes such as increasing the length of the lease to 5 years, increasing the annual fee from $5,000 annually to $6,000 annually, a clause allowing for immediate termination if the state determines that the license agreement constitutes a conversion of Ford Park into non-public use, and a change the requirement to remove the seasonal dock at Ford Park from November 15th to December 15th. There's some minor changes too, as the company changed official names and has been passed down by Wallstrom to Zach and Andy. Zach's right here in the front row. So there's some other minor changes that you saw. I provided a red line version in addition to the actual draft there.
Yeah, the red line is really helpful because you see exactly what's going to change.
If it comes on, but so that is. That's basically the major changes though that are of substance, I would say. Attorney Jim Raymer, which is always a good idea, added some history and the recitals to how this came to be, so. I guess, right, council's goal is, oh, Jim, JB, if you want.
One comment, Victor, I noticed in 4.2 on this, on page 3, equipment operations, it states the barges in the mooring area, the boom shall be maintained in a down position. We just dealt with this
Oh, yeah.
in our last meeting, and that's supposed to be no higher than the spuds when they're anchoring, so we need to reflect that in
Okay.
that release.
We can get 4.2 changed. Yeah.
Good.
That's the only change I saw. Unless you want to do it different.
If I could say up position.
Nice try.
Good try, Zach.
So yeah, that, so there, I guess it's up to council to discuss and then decide if not want to approve and renew the license for 5 years with the clauses presented.
I just have one question for Jim, actually, or Jim. How did we arrive at the 6,000 for 5 years? Where did
That
that?
was a topic of discussion at the table on that.
Right,
There were some of us, myself included, who thought there might be a little more. And the consensus was 6,000. And it went from 5 to 6.
we went from 5 to 6
And
this
when
last.
did we start with the first year? Was it
It was
Five.
five the first year.
5 the
But they
next
were
2
saying for
years,
the next two.
and then 6.
And then part of the logic on going from 5 to 6 is that over the course of that 5-year lease, that would reflect a 5% or a 4% increase, mimicking hopefully normal inflation over that time.
So it would be 20%
It'd be
over 5 years, right?
right, but
So that would be 4% inflation every year.
correct. That's
From the initial,
right.
not from the, if you,
We're not gonna stage it over the 5 years at 6,000 right up front for the term.
I think that's totally up to you guys on how you want to do it.
I just feel it's a little low. I'm not gonna die on this hill. I just feel it's a little low for a 5-year period. But I do remember now where we said it was a 20% increase, you guys did it, and that was 4% from the 5,000
Right.
each year. It would be a little bit more if you took it, 4% each year, but it's not.
Well, and it's estimated, it's an estimate based on not knowing what inflation is gonna be from here going out. We're hoping it's gonna come down, so.
Sure hope so.
We hope so. Okay,
Okay, good.
I can, yeah, I'm okay. I just needed a review on where that came from.
You need another motion?
You want any public comment? Yes.
Sorry. Any public comment on the dock and dredge proposal? Online? Okay,
And I'm gonna, a motion to approve the license as presented with the addition of changing 4.2 to reflect the agreed to boom position. So,
I'll make that motion with the change to 4.2.
the second. I'll do a roll call since it's a license agreement.
Okay.
Cups,
Yes.
Melky,
Yes.
Rondell,
Yes.
and Leo.
yes,
All right, motion passes. Thanks, JB, and thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah,
Well,
thanks.
keep up the good work.
Thanks.
Nice, thank you. Yeah. put that all through.
Thanks, Zach.
Yeah, thank you all very much. Have a nice night.
Thanks.
And I think that's all that was on the agenda. I'm just joking. I'm gonna speak a little bit, but I'm gonna pass it after to Jeff. I'm having some difficulty speaking here, but I'll pass it to Jeff to give a little more history of the planning commission. But the planning commission has been working on changes for the short-term rental ordinance and licensing process. This new proposed ordinance includes the following main changes. One, it would limit our short-term rentals to 40 in single-family residential districts. So non-single family residential districts would still have an uncapped, unlimited amount, but single-family residential districts would be limited to 40. Which I believe licensed right now, Jeff, we have somewhere about 61 in 2022, right?
Over some of those.
Okay, all right. So, and then the second big change is to allow the city to establish a scoring system to select the 40 STRs should there be more than 40 applicants for position. But I'll let Jeff go through some of that history there and some of the numbers. So we can give that background and also discuss what the planning commission's reasoning was.
Yes, and this has been a topic, well, really, since I started here in 2015. Short-term rentals has been a topic of conversation, and we have evolved our process in monitoring and regulating them continually since that point in time. I believe we created our short-term rental license in 2018, hired a company to help us monitor and find those properties in 2019 and 20. I think it was 2 years ago, 2 summers ago, we had a really good public input session I think we had 70 to 100 people that came in to provide a lot of feedback on short-term rentals. And then more recently, discussion was had at City Council and for the Planning Commission to relook at the situation, readdress where we were in our monitoring and regulating of short-term rentals. And through that, the Planning Commission felt that one of the cries from the public was the number of short-term rentals that we had and where they were located. So the Planning Commission, reviewed, came up with an idea. Let's create a limitation on the number within single-family residential areas. Staff felt that we needed to have a defensible position. Right now, we have approximately 90 licensed short-term rental properties within the city of Harbor Springs. We've talked about restricting the number to 40 or a number to be determined. That was the number suggested by the Planning Commission within single-family residential zones. Right now, in those residential zones, we have 61. Of those 61, 2/3 of them are within the R1C zoning district. Granted, that is our largest zoning district within the city of Harbor Springs, but it also covers some of the smaller residential areas. So R1C homes, good examples of locations of where those are at. Layton Park, the subdivision that's in and around the Harbor Market, Lake Street, a lot of the properties on the south side of Lake Street, before you get to Summit and Pine. That's kind of your separation when you cross that area, you're going into a different zoning district. That's a map on board there showing locations of where those 90 short-term rentals are.
Jeff, I think this one was, I think we have fewer.
There might be fewer.
Yeah, this is a
There might be
little
around
older
80,
map, but
when that made
it's
map
probably
was-
about 80 years.
Of the 90, 29 are in business districts or multiple residential districts. And those were areas that we felt we did not need to put a limiting number. I think the idea, from my experience with the meetings, that was kind of a way to incentivize that those might be areas that would be better suited to short-term rental activity than single-family zones. And the idea that we had was we needed to find some defensible way to, if we get to a situation where we have 60 applicants in those areas, like we had last year, if we are going to limit to a number lower than that, as an example, 40, then we need to have a defensible measure of how we can come to that so that there can't be some accusation of favoritism in some way, shape, or form, that we have a method that we can stick to. So we created an evaluation sheet outlining some of the criteria that the public gave us that they felt was important in looking at short-term rental activity. We had a lot of people at the public meeting that we had that addressed that, said that inspections of homes would be a really good idea, and that would lead to making sure that those homes were safe for people to come and visit. We've listed out those ideas on the evaluation sheet that you had. I believe the idea was that this would be a scoring sheet, and that if it came down to a scenario where we had more applicants than licenses available, that we would issue those licenses to the property owners that had the highest score on this. Just to run down some of these, we talked about local agents. One of the things that occurred was we had local agents that really weren't that local. We had somebody that was a property owner that lived out of state, and their local agent was also out of state. That local agent did take care of situations, but having a local agent that is within reasonable proximity was something that we felt was of value, and that would create a higher ability for them to deal with situations as they came up. Status of complaints, I think that one's pretty self-explanatory there. A number of these allude to an annual inspection. And I just wanted to clarify, this would not be an annual inspection that would be done by the city of Harbor Springs staff. The idea here is that they could go to a company that we would have a form that they could fill out. They could address the items that we feel are of importance. You know, we talked about smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, and fire extinguishers. And that would be something that that property owner could have done and provide us a report. We also provided kind of a timeline of how this would be done. The key here, there was a concern that the number of short-term rentals were changing as we went through the year. You know, we would have some in May, we would have a higher number in June, July, or August. By the time we got to November, December, the number was even greater. So it was hard to tell how many we had at any given point. So another idea was that we would license all of the short-term rentals at the beginning of the year and get them done at that point. And that those would be the ones licensed for that remainder of the year. And that if people purchase their homes at some point during that time, they would need to wait till the beginning of the next year to apply for a license. So we have kind of a process of how this might work here. It requires a little bit more staff time to administer, but you know, we are talking about a change that will require a little bit more level of maintenance and time and researching and making sure that things are being done the way they need to be done. But this is something that a lot of people in the community brought forward at the big public meeting that we had, various ideas. And then we've had a few people that have come in with concerns throughout. I do want to caveat all that. We have not really had a high level of complaints filed. I believe Kyle can talk about how many he's received. I haven't received too many. We do get one or two, but it's not, we're not getting them in mass.
What is our policy for that enforcement wise? Level of fines? How do we have anything in place?
We do. Jeff, what do I go with the letter?
Yeah, so right now, the policy that we have in place right now, there is a fee of, boy, I want to say it's either $200 or $250
$250
for the first offense. I think that goes up to $400 or $500 for a second offense. Throughout that process, we also have the opportunity for that property owner or applicant, if they've been issued a fine, or we can contact them with a letter stating that they need to come in and meet with, we have a small committee made up of Kyle Knight, the city manager, and the city clerk. Technically, all of this is under the city clerk's purview. So if there's a situation where a property owner, under the current rules, you know, has some issue going on, noise or garbage or, you know, parking or something like that. If the city determines that it's requires going forward, then we would reach out to that property owner. More than likely, the first step would be that they would meet with the committee. The committee would determine whether a fee is appropriate, or they could potentially issue them
a suspension of their permit or eventual revocation.
And we can keep all of those things in place. This is not necessarily saying that those things would go away. We would still have things in place in case there was a situation that needed to be addressed, that there was a problem at a location. This is simply a new process that is being proposed. If we're interested in limiting the number of short-term rentals to a number that's less than what people are currently doing, we wanted to make sure that we had something defensible. And this is basically a method that we came up with the planning commission on how to do that.
What is our policy for people that are operating without a license?
If they're operating without a license right now, we require them to conform and get a license. If they're operating without a license and we have no license.
Is there a fine like per day, per week? I mean, if you broke somebody, Kyle went, say I'm doing it, I get a notice and I'm doing it 60 days later. I mean, what's that? What do we have in place for that?
Every day is a violation.
Every day is what? So there's a fine assessed for that
Every day would be a violation.
We haven't done that. I think all those that have been operating, you send them a letter and then they take.
I guess what I'm getting at, if we're gonna limit this, there's going to be
Yes.
people that are gonna try to get around it. So what do we have in place to try to enforce that.
We do have, it would be a $250, I think it's a $250 fine.
But I don't think $250 is enough considering some of these people are making $5,000 a week.
Well, I
That's,
think
I guess that's what I'm getting.
that's a good point.
$250 isn't enough.
Is that a day though? A day, right?
Yeah,
If they
I mean,
continue to
the
operate.
issue is, even though you have a fine, you still have to go, you have to go to
You
court
have to
to
go
enforce
forth,
it.
get it.
And the question is, how much is the court going to order the person to pay?
Mhm.
Regardless of what the city puts on as the fine, it's still up to the court to determine what the fine is going to be. So
Mhm.
I'm just saying.
Regardless of what the city says the
That's
fine.
correct.
You know, Jim, you have talked about previously, I don't want to get too much time on this, but having our own municipal borough, I guess, of violations.
Municipal Ordinance Violation Bureau.
Yeah.
It is something I think the city should consider establishing. It's one that where ordinance violations can be processed by the city and could basically compel a higher level of fees than the court does. So there's an appeal from that, but at least at the local level, we could enforce that fee.
So it gives the city more control.
Yes, it does.
What's-
It's something that we've talked about doing. It's not difficult to set up. There is there'll be some startup costs, but and maybe a little more administration, but not overly problematic. So
That
it's
sounds
something.
like a good topic to put on a future agenda.
It is something that we
Dig
get,
into
yeah.
more deeply.
Because it is, I won't necessarily say a problem, but it has been, I guess, as part of the enforcement process, part of a hindrance for us is enforcing something quickly and effectively is that we have to go to court.
But putting it on a future agenda allows us to get into
Right,
it
yeah.
in depth and understand what it allows us, what it might cost, what the downside might be.
We did have one incident last year where we did file a civil infraction against an individual. They admitted responsibility immediately, paid the fine and stopped doing it. So, the process can work. And, most people are responsible and they don't want to get a civil infraction. And if you give them one, they're going to change, their behavior is going to change. So.
Are you guys talking, is this specific to short-term rental?
Okay,
What
this
are you talking about?
is time for us to
Okay.
deliberate. Thanks. Where was I gonna go? Anyway, I think we should talk about, I'm not in favor of adding more overhead or administration. But if it gives us more control, I'm certainly interested, and I think council would be interested in what the trade-offs are. To have more control versus whatever overhead that might be involved.
Maybe I know Victor and I have talked about this, why not prepare a report of some kind that outline what would be involved, and then you have something to evaluate.
Okay, great. Anything else you want to add, Jeff?
I don't think so. If you have any questions about that process or.
Why did you come up with the 40 versus just putting a moratorium on what we got now?
Well, first, I think the idea of a moratorium is you identify a crisis that needs to be addressed. And you say we need to pause things so that we can come up with a way to address that. And I think what we've done here is come up with a way to address things. A moratorium, we can't have a never-ending moratorium where we just say we're gonna not issue licenses for whatever reason. We would have to say we're not going to issue licenses for a specific reason and for a specific time so that we can come up with the answer to that issue, right? So I think this is, to some extent, the answer to the issue as the planning commission saw it.
And I also say, the planning commission was late last year, earlier this year, did recommend, I think, a moratorium, and the council decided not to go with the moratoriums and redirected this back to.
Because there was a program already in place at the planning commission to take a look at this.
Yeah.
And the timing of the proposed moratorium really wasn't gonna, we gave some people so much time that it wasn't gonna change anything. So that's why.
Moratorium is probably not the right word. I should have used it. It's,
limit?
why not just say, okay, we have, would you say 60 or 61? And you want to lower that to 40? I'm just wondering, why not just say we're done? Effective the first year, there are no more. That whatever the number is, we have currently 90. And just leave it at that. Business district is what it is, residential district is what it is. And if you sell your residence, then that's a whole, that just goes away. We don't have to, start over, so to speak. I wasn't at the planning commission, so I'm just curious, 'cause I think.
There was a lot of.
Personally, I think we're open up a bigger issue. by trying to Eliminate 20. Again, we haven't had a lot of issues with what we currently have. I'm in favor of stopping it, don't get me wrong, but
Well, and that number can be adjusted. That's the number that the planning commission came up with, was 40, which would be a reduction from the 60 that are in those neighborhoods now to 40. So we would be reducing by 21.
But having attended the meetings and I didn't participate in the discussions, but having witnessed them. It was really what do people feel comfortable with? There was no analysis or math behind it.
Correct.
Okay, so there's two venues for people to complain. They complain to city council, they complain to the city, or they complain to the police. Have you kept track of how many you've gotten over time and what the complaints were for? So that you could issue a regular report, so that we know we're not waving our hands and saying, yeah, we haven't gotten many, but we've got 8 or 2 or 4. I think it's really important as we talk about this topic that we have specifics about who called when, about what, and what was done.
I have not kept track of that.
We need to
The difficulty there is most of the concerns that I get, and I guess I have to quantify that as concerns versus complaints. Complaints, I think I've received maybe 3.
Okay.
Concerns are a different story. Concerns would be more of the way that people feel that they're changing our neighborhood, changing the community. And that's something that is a frequent topic, but it's difficult to really put a number on.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Although it would be useful, I agree, it would be difficult to quantify, but complaints, we should know exactly who, what, when, where, why.
I believe Chief Knight, you have.
Now, that's the city. Now, on the police side, you do have numbers.
We had 8 in 2021, and in 2022, I believe we had 2.
And of the 8, if I remember, in 2021,
The majority of them were
one individual, I think.
one address.
one rental.
And some of them weren't deemed as
Correct.
real, provable.
Right.
So the
So-
complaints that are fueling this are very low.
And we
Right.
held one suspension hearing in 2021. We didn't have a suspension hearing in 2022. We issued one ticket, one fine, I should say.
And did the suspension, did the hearing result in a suspension?
It resulted in some consequences. I forget what. I don't know.
Fine
I
or?
don't think it was, it may have been a 30-day suspension, but it was more of a fine and remediation, just correcting the problem.
But that same property then, I think it was the same property that got the fine this year?
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, so,
And I will say that the new rules that we have in place with the contact and with the planning commission, I feel they've helped. Maybe not, but that's my personal feeling. We have not had that many complaints.
and to Jeff's point, this started a while ago. And we've gone through 4 or 5 iterations. I mean, we're learning as we go, as is every other municipality in the country, trying to figure out what is appropriate for a specific municipality. I mean, we're talking about short-term rentals in a city where there's no hotel. So we're talking about tourism coming through, and where's the balance amongst those numbers?
We've also heard, and I don't have numbers for this, but you've probably heard it at council meetings as well as staff, people who say they're hesitant to contact police or to make a complaint. I don't have the exact numbers, and unfortunately, we can't quantify. If we don't have that, we can't quantify. So we do encourage people to contact the police or city staff when there is a violation, so we can keep track of that. So we know, but we have heard from people in the past saying that they didn't want to call the police or want to be that.
Well, I think they
Just so you guys have.
but that gets back to education and enforcement. If people are not willing to, if they're willing to complain or comment to individual city staff, but aren't willing to call the city and make a formal complaint or call the police, there's a limit to how much we can do. We need that input in order to determine what's really going on and how we can address it. Do we want to deliberate? Should we get public comment?
I'd let comment probably.
Okay.
I'm the first. I would,
So shall we open up for public comment?
yes.
Hi, I'm Vance Van Dale. I have a home at 440 Cottage Lane and we have a property at 450. I guess I agree. I think John, you're making really good comments. I agree with a lot of what you're saying. You know, there haven't been a lot of concerns or complaints. Maybe there are concerns, but there haven't been a lot of concerns or complaints. Why put something in place when there's not really a problem? I know there are some neighbors who don't like maybe that we rent our home when we're not here. We're here all summer. Occasionally we rent our home. Maybe some neighbors don't like it that their neighbors have decided they want to rent their home. There might be some things I don't like that my neighbor does, but do we have to put a system in place if there aren't any real issues? Just because some people have concerns about, you know, they don't like the way the neighborhood is changing. And, you know, you have to consider personal property rights. You know, I'm sure you all agree with small government and limiting Big Brother. This seems very much like Big Brother to me. Trying to tell your neighbor what you can do with your property. If there's no issue, if there are issues, address those issues with a complaint, call the police. Sounds like that's not happening. Why do we need this? I mean, you have instituted good changes in the last year or so. And, you know, this seems to me like overreach and unneeded overreach. You know, we don't have an issue, like you say, we don't have a hotel here. Everyone knows that where people stay is where they spend most of their money. And, you know, within a mile of where people spend the night, that's where they spend most of their money. Do we want to limit that from Harbor Springs when a lot of our businesses are, you know, not doing that great? So anyway, I think this is unneeded. You know, also with the inspector, the homeowner chooses their own inspector and issues a report to you. How do you know that inspector is legitimate? Do you have to license an inspector? It sounds like it brings in a lot of complication, a lot of government that's not needed. So,
And I think, thank you. The point isn't to go down the whole of the details. And again, I don't think we specifically mentioned this, but this topic is on the council agenda because Planning Commission wanted to get input from us. There is a public meeting scheduled at a planning commission where more discussion, more detail can be provided.
I'll clarify that.
To the owners of this proposal.
I'll clarify that if we go forward with some sort of recommended ordinance, there'll be a public hearing on it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your work and your thoughtfulness about this issue. I also agree with why bring it down to 40. It seems rather arbitrary to me. If you have 60 short-term rentals now, they're not causing problems. Why take that right away from people? Unless there is a real issue, then take it away. So anyway, thanks.
Thank you.
Then just a gentle reminder, just if you address council, Jeff is staff, he works for council in the city, so he's not gonna, it's not him, so.
He's gonna remain.
I don't mind. Just so that you know, it's not me coming up with all of these ideas. I'm just expressing what.
I'm just the messenger.
Next.
So I'm Doug Vandale. I also own the same residence at 440 Cottage Lane. I only want to make one other comment, and that is about the proposed methodology whereby basically if, for instance, there are too many, you have to get it between January 1st and February 1st. You're the first person to get it in, you know, from year to year, based on the proposal here, there could be a mad rush on, you know, January 2nd to run to the office here in order to put your mount in. And we have been, you know, for several years, and there's a lot of folks here who have had really responsible rentals. And I think that is important, that a lot of the people who have rented here for a while have done so responsibly. And so that should be recognized to some extent as well, is that the majority have been responsible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matthew Dipple, 389 Pine Street. Sit down here. So my family and I have been coming up here for a little over 7 years. And about a year ago, we made a financial crazy decision to purchase a second home up here. We've been coming up here a lot using short-term rentals. And in order to help with that financial burden, we decide to rent out our home to other families so that they can enjoy our home, they can enjoy our town. And when we're not here, they can be here. So I don't oppose, I certainly do agree that we do need a short-term rental program. I'm not opposed to some of the things on this program. I've seen a lot of programs around the country. There's a lot of case studies being done on how they control all of these. I like what I've seen. I think it does take a lot of good risk out of even the owner in that situation, especially the insurance piece of it. I could give you 100 stories of horror there. But let me give you some statistics on this. And I know you said 61. A week ago, it's actually 78 active currently right now, according to AirDNA. So if you limit that down to 40, what happens is 532 families will not be visiting Harbor Springs annually anymore. In that situation, with the amount of money, local economy will lose roughly $522,000 in revenue on an annual basis. These people will not be coming here. There's nowhere else to go. The local employment that required to support that short-term rental, the cleaners, the landscapers, the snow removal, and the tradesmen, they will see their income cut in half. And probably some of them would lose their jobs. So, 78 short-term rental is 7% of the amount of housing in the area, in that Harbor Springs area. That is well below the 30% threshold that the Michigan House Bill 4722 had passed earlier this year from the House. So, beyond the negative impact of the local economy, there's several, probably 38 homeowners that have to make a hard decision at that point as to whether they want to consider this place an inclusive community for them and their families. So, again, I'm not opposed to what I see here. What I am opposed to is the limit on the number. I do agree with Mr. Cups that, keep the 78 or the 61 and keep it at that point. But then let those people keep that license until they either rescind it or it's revoked due to violation or non-compliance. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tarczynski.
Rick Tarczynski, 465 State Street. In response to Mr. Cups saying that, we're opening up a can of worms with these regulations and maybe we should outlaw them altogether. A large number of people in Harbor Springs have been trying just for that to get rid of short-term rentals in residential districts. These businesses don't belong there. They're designated for single family, and that does not include businesses, so they shouldn't be there in the first place. Second place, that's 60 properties that could be rented out to people to live here full-time and have jobs here. So we're keeping people away. El Dicka's moving to Petoskey because he can't find a house in town because they're all short-term rentals. There's also the problem of the deterioration of our neighborhoods. The house next door to me is not taken care of. It's a dump. And many others are like that. And finally, if people can't afford a house here, why are their property rights more valuable than mine? I live here, I pay taxes. I bought a house in a residential neighborhood, expecting to be in a neighborhood where I know my neighbors. We look out for each other instead of having somebody next door to me. I have no idea who they are. I have to lock my house. I have to lock my car because anything could happen. So I think, the idea of no short-term rentals in residential districts is great, but we can't get that through. So this new plan is sort of a halfway measure. We're going to cut down the number of people that are displaced, the number of people that have a bad neighbor, and give people a chance to, I guess, enjoy Harbor Spring. Thank you.
Peter Scholler, 244 West Summit. I appreciate concerns. I also appreciate all the work you guys have done. This, I think, having a plan to kind of keep the level of rentals and the quality of the rental, the safety of the rental is important. We do rent our place. We bought it. So appreciate your work.
Thank you. I think there was a raised hand.
Yeah, there are, and so we'll, I think there's still people.
I'm sorry, I missed some. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Sue Winter. I live near the high school. And I'm still a broken record on this, but I think that, you know, there's so much focus on complaints. Oh my gosh, we have no complaints. Well, it's not, I just don't think it's a complaint thing. And I understand people want to own short-term rentals and evidently it's an economic boom for them. But, you know, I think if you have to rent a house short-term because you can't afford to pay for the house, don't buy it. I mean, it's on the backs of us residents that are putting up with your rental. And don't buy the house. You know, it's, and I think that, you know, our council, I really appreciate you listening to us. And I'm not going to call Kyle and say, Officer Kyle, you know, our neighborhood's disintegrating, come help. That's the complaints that we have. Because I mean, I've been here for a really long time, so I feel like I have some authority to speak on at least about the Bluff neighborhoods. And every year it's disintegrating more and more and more. It's becoming, you know, mini hotels all around. We don't have a community anymore. And you guys, we elect you. We live in your neighborhoods. We are neighborhood people. You represent our neighborhoods. You know, you're all we have to help us maintain our community and our neighborhoods and not give them away to investors. And it isn't about, you know, a fire pit or a garbage or cars parked everywhere. Those are minor noises. And you feel really dumb calling the police for things like that. And people, I don't think call the police half the time, but they're annoyed. You know, it's like, this isn't our place anymore. You know, and I love tourists and we go downtown and visit with people, sit on the benches, you can meet the neatest people. But we want to go home to our houses and not have the tourists come staring at our yards and looking at us like, you know, oh, you're a Harbor Springs resident. We need to have our neighborhoods. And I think our community is really being eroded. And you guys are the only one that can fix it. And it's not, you know, and I understand, you know, people say, well, we're great renters. We take such great care of our property and we only have the best and we, you know, check everyone out. It's not about that. It's about what it's doing to our community. And I would say, look at Charlevoix, look at Petoskey. Do you ask, why do they not allow short-term rentals? What do they know that we don't know? What does Charlevoix know? that we don't know. Charlevoix is at Charlevoix is at 80. They targeted it, they stopped at 80. They saw the writing on the wall and they're double the size of us. So 40 is a really good number. I mean, that's probably it's in line with Charlevoix. So I know I just, you know, it's hard to get owners of short-term rentals to understand that it's not things that they're doing poorly. I mean, you could have priests and nuns living in every house, wonderful renters, renting.
Thank you.
That isn't the point.
That's your time.
The trans.
Thank you.
Depends on the priest, I guess.
That is
Yeah,
your,
that's what my
thank you.
husband would say. Thank you, guys.
I would just like to remind people, even online or on, don't interrupt other people when they're speaking. The mayor or acting mayor will let people know when their time is done.
Okay, anybody else in the room? Okay, now we can go.
All right, Elizabeth Coonan, you have your hand raised.
Hello. I'm Elizabeth Keenan from 111 East 3rd Street. Hello, here I am. We are recent property owners in Harbor Springs. I have been visiting with my family Harbor Springs since I was a child. My parents owned a house for 15 years on Main Street until my father's health made it impossible, excuse me. And it has been a long-term goal for my husband and I to buy a house in Harbor Springs so that we can eventually become permanent residents of Harbor Springs. Now, this is not the 80s. Property costs are through the roof. College tuition is out crazy. And I have two in college at the time. And, you know, we worked really hard to buy a house and make it work for us. And subsidizing our cost by doing short-term rentals is how we make that happen. And if you limit it, then you are taking other people's dreams away. And this is something that we've been working on for a very long time. So I don't agree with the changes. I think that if there isn't an issue, and it really sounds like there isn't an issue, that it should stay as it is. And thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Okay, the other hand raised on Zoom is Robin Johnson.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're all well. Thank you for this. I want to jump right in. I have a lot of comments that I had written down, but I want to address very quickly, Susan Winter, your comment that if you can't afford to buy a place here, then you shouldn't be doing it. That comment is absolutely disgraceful. Like Elizabeth Keenan, I have a family. I had 5 children that I put through college myself. I've been a part of this community for 62 years, and that comment from you was absolutely unnecessary. For you to say also that short-term rentals cause the disintegration of a neighborhood, well, you ought to have seen my house in my neighborhood before I bought mine, because what I've done is 1,000 times better than what was there before. And you also said you don't like tourists. Well, if you don't like tourists, then you certainly should not have moved to Harbor Springs, because it has been a tourist destination for the 62 years that I've been alive. We used to have fudgy parties back in the 70s and make fun of all the tourists. So this is nothing new. So the other thing is I do appreciate all the statistics, Jim, that you shared, or Jeff, I'm sorry, that you shared. And I would really ask that City Council think and give a rational justification for even having this discussion based on what Jeff said, that he hasn't really had any complaints based on the police reporting that this year they had, I have a written letter that says they've had 3, and I think Jeff said 2 calls for service at a short-term rental. So what is a rational basis for even having this discussion? The other things I want to address is the parties that are most affected by this proposal are us, who are the short-term rental owners, as well as the renters who count on us having these properties. I only found out about this being a proposal, and this is my livelihood. I can't pay my mortgage if I can't rent my house. So the fact that I was not given any written notice of this from the city, and I was that I just magically was supposed to know that this was a topic of discussion, I do not think is enough notification for the short-term rental owners. We know who they are because we've all paid our fees. So I think before any decision can be made, council, I think you have to allow better notice to the people who it's affecting. I also would like to understand a little better the rationale.
Ms. Johnson, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but your 3 minutes are up.
Oh, goodness. Okay, thank you.
I believe that's all that we have.
Okay. Well, should we close the,
Well, yeah.
do we have any more?
No.
So I would make the motion to close the public comment. All in favor?
Your hand up. Victor.
Oh, got a new hand up.
Okay.
Molly? Well, Molly, you may speak. Oh.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, public comment session is closed. Shall we talk?
I first want to remind you all that we do have a short-term rental license, not in an R1 district. We've done this before, but I just want to remind you of that. What are we talking about? Are we talking about what planning commission, not whether we should or shouldn't have, but specifically what
or 50 or whatever they decide on, but I think like 61 is a random number.
Well, the 61 is the actual number of
Right.
licenses we have today. 40 is around.
Yes.
So I guess what I'm hearing is basically to grandfather all the existing ones in. Is that?
What's on the table?
Right, no, but I just wanted to summarize.
It'd be my suggestion to draw a line in the sand of what we have. And then it's a first come, first serve on whatever date, you know, they've come up with at the beginning of the year. And then, you know, that's it. But I think we're gonna run into, the gentleman stated that, you know, that there's 70 something. So there's 10, 12 ones out there that are on some registry, you know, that we're not accounting for.
And I'm not sure if that number 78 was in the residential districts or if that was overall in the city.
I have a feeling that that's the total number of short-term rentals that are active at this current time, but that's probably within all of our zoning districts, which would include the central business district.
Okay, but so that's what I'm getting at. So we need to kind of,
Because our total number is that we have licensed for this year's 90.
And that does not mean they're all active.
Right.
We know that there's some that are not active.
the ultimate goal here is to try to get residents to come here and live, not turn this into, rental community type thing. But the problem I run into is property values in this city are,
It's only part of the problem.
a guy my age can't afford to live in this
It's
city,
only part of the problem.
And if we don't look at density housing and some other things down the road, it's gonna belong to everybody in the townships.
But the total price pressure and is not just due to the short-term rental.
No.
It's the desirability of our area and all the people who want to live here. So it's both.
There's a lot of things.
So, but I'd rather see people coming and going here, spending money than driving down Main Street black, because there's no lights on. I mean, when I was a kid, Main Street was full of lights. Today it's black.
That was so long ago.
I know. But that's what this town's come to. I
Well,
mean,
part of the reality is that we've got, my personal impression, having heard many stories over the years, has gone from resort to tourist. We have a tourist town for X number of months during.
we have an enormous amount of money in the townships, and
we don't have a hotel.
an enormous amount of those people own 3, 4, 5 houses in this community for 2 months out of the year.
That's right.
And you can't stop it.
That's a macro problem, not this one.
All right.
Victor, can you pull up the criteria thing for me? Because I have some concerns about some of this also, to throw out. The distance from a local agent. There's some, I have some concern there. We've got 15 or 20 of them by the same local agent. So I'm concerned about some of that. The complaint thing, again, we really haven't had complaints in general. I know there are people unhappy with it, but in terms of formal complaints, there have not been very many. The annual inspection, I don't quite know how we're gonna handle that. Who's gonna pay for it? Who's gonna say who can do it? I think I hate to say this because the planning commission has worked very, very hard on this and I appreciate that, but I think there's a lot of loopholes in this that could get us into some real.
The inspections have to be done by somebody like me or a home building inspector who has a certificate.
Which is not.
Especially to go through the life safety.
Which
issues.
isn't
Which is
addressed in this at all.
Well, it is with smoke detectors and all that.
Well,
But egress,
yeah, it
I mean,
is,
all
but
that
it's not
stuff.
addressed about who's gonna do the inspections. I think before I can say yes to vote something in, there's some things that need to be clarified. There also was one about the neighbors. I can't remember what it said. There's
Letters
this,
from neighbors.
Frozen by all surrounding neighbors.
yeah, I struggle with that a little bit.
Never been.
I don't think that because a neighbor says yes or no, or likes it or doesn't like it, or your neighbor's your friend, or that your neighbor's got an issue with you about something else and writes a bad letter. I think that's a really subjective way to look at something that should be very objective if we're gonna give scores to it. I think there's some things on there that just are not gonna work very well. Certainly, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide, those are easy. Those are black and white. We can see if they're there, at least in the moment when you walk through the house. But I have some concerns about this. I also have concerns about the number and what the spin-off is gonna be if in March this year, we tell 20 or 25 of the folks that already have their houses rented that they don't have a license for this year. And they've already got them full of renters. I don't think that time frame works at all. I have some concerns about how this really can work.
Like Nancy, I mean, the planning commission has invested a lot of time and effort into doing this, and I applaud that.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's ready for prime time. I think a lot of good ideas have come out of this process that could be fed back into it at this point, many of them very recent. When I first saw this, as I'm trying to do, being very very compulsive. I sat down and I went through the whole process with the checklist and the memo and all the details that were involved, and who will be the inspector, should we have an inspector that the city uses, like we do with an arborist and all that. And then when I was all done with it, I backed up and I said, is this really the right way to go? And I think it's not. The number 40 came out of a drive to get the number down from where it was today. And I listened to the logic, or I listened to the discussions, was a little lost about the logic. I'm not in favor. Well, part of it, as Nancy has highlighted, a couple of things that just logically don't work. If you do this on an annual basis, you can't run a short-term rental business because you're going to book a year or 2 years out. You can't run your business if you're on unknown, if someone's going to get in front of you. I don't relish the thought of the city get into process of telling the current license holders that they won't have one next year. I don't think it's fair. We have the majority of the short-term rentals in town have done a great job, and there have been no complaints and no issues. So I couldn't support that. I actually made a punch list here, which I will go over very quickly, but I think this needs to go back to the planning commission. The limit of 40 short-term rentals is unfair to many who have current licenses. It risks litigation against the city. The scoring is very complicated, is relatively subjective, and on an annual basis just doesn't work if we're allowing short-term rentals at all. We need to clarify who a local agent is. Anything related to inspections need to be clearly specified. And I won't bore you, or I plan on cleaning this up and sending it to the planning commission. But on the non-analytical side, I identify with and understand the concerns about the changing culture that's occurring within the town. I think it's been happening for decades, but it's being accelerated by a number of different things. We need short-term rentals. We don't have hotels. We're a tourist town. So lots of reasons to continue it. So I would suggest that we send it back to the planning commission to move forward with their idea of having a public meeting and take another run at it. I don't think it's viable at this point. And I think it's a lot. I appreciate Jeff's comments about, well, it's going to take a little bit more time. And I politely disagree. This is a time sink. It's a lot of overhead just in getting it to work the first time, let alone doing it every year. I don't think it's the right thing for the city to do. I do agree with, at least in the short term, limiting the number, but I would limit it to the number of rental licenses we already have out there. Keep it clean.
Was the recommendation to go back to planning commission using the number that we already have for 2022 and to find new criteria, or to do what? Because it could go in many different directions if we just send it back to the planning commission for discussion.
I'm not ready to write out a proposal to take back to them. I don't want to think I can't speak for council at this point. I have my list of input. We're not ready, but I am ready. I would support stopping the issuance of licenses and limiting to the number of licenses we have today. Going beyond that, there's still a lot of work to be done.
Can I ask a clarification on that?
Yeah.
When you say limiting the number of licenses, I can see that in two ways. One is if we limit it to the 90 or the 60 that we have, depending on what zones districts we look at, are we looking at specifically the number, or are we looking at the people that hold those current licenses? Because that can change. Like another statistic, I don't think I mentioned it. We had 15 new licenses for 2022 properties that previously had not been rented. So I guess a follow-up question would be, would we be saying that the people that hold licenses can carry forward their licenses into the new year, or we're only going to allow 60 within this district? But if other people get licenses, then there might not be licenses available for people that already have one.
I think we're, correct me if I'm wrong, saying the folks that have them now, keep them, because they're all gonna roll again in a month, in 5 weeks or whatever. That they be allowed to keep them, because once again, if they have short-term rental licenses, I can almost guarantee you that they have already rented those homes for next summer. Now, should they have, not knowing if they were gonna have a license, that's a whole different issue. But it's a business for them. It's a, they're paying their mortgage or whatever with it. They've already rented them. So if you don't give them those licenses, I can foresee some real issues. I mean, they're not gonna just call all their people and tell them they're not gonna rent it.
I just wanted to kind of clarify the point so that when we're.
Yeah, I
Good
mean,
point.
that's
Okay,
what
but to that point, we're not talking about guaranteeing them for the same. We're talking about a number of 61 in single family residential areas. The others remain open like they are today, because this whole discussion and all the work the planning commission did is specifically about single family residential zones.
But are you saying the 61 that have them in the R1 zones?
61 licenses.
But what about the ones that already have them this year?
Right.
Are you gonna give them those, as long as all 61 of those people want them?
If they
There will
apply
be no
within
new one.
the time limit and they pay their fees and they do everything they need to do, yes.
So they would get the first shot at those 61, am I right? I'm
But yeah.
clarifying.
Now, again, some of the details need to be worked out.
I guess I'm taking this as, it sounds like limited number of licenses at 61.
Single
Preference
family
to-
residents.
In a single family residential, preference to current license holders.
As long as they meet all the criteria.
Yeah.
If 10 of them fall out and 10 new people apply, you're still at 61.
And you'd have to put a limit on by a certain date. that-
Whatever rules we
Yeah,
have in
whatever.
place today would apply.
I heard a little bit different from maybe Jamie or John, was that if this, and then correct me if I'm wrong, that if 61 are there and then 5 drop out, then we're down to 56 total.
Well, Jamie made that comment, but
Yeah.
right now, until we get a little more in, I'm in agreement with John. I think ultimately the plan commission's idea is to get the number down. I don't think we're quite there yet.
Yeah.
I would just like to
Because we don't
limit,
have a rationale.
I would like to limit, I agree with John, limit, we can't have any more. What we have now, we stop. We limit it, so, there can't be any more new ones. And then we twink, so to speak, whatever it is we need to do to start. Maybe go in the other direction, or we just maintain, we stay right where we're at.
Jim, how do you suggest going forward?
I think what's been suggested is workable, and I think the planning commission needs to hear what the council is saying. I mean,
the inspection, I mean, they've done a lot of work and it's all good. But I think to stop, so we're not doing this for the next 10 years.
I think
draw a line and say,
I think
here we
it's,
are,
I
this
think
is all we're doing.
You've expressed some concerns that I had, because I think it is opening the door to some problems to just drop the number down and force people who already have licenses out. I don't think that's a good idea. So I think what's been expressed here at the table is workable. You limit the number, the existing license holders, if they have first right. If they want to renew it, they can, and assuming that they have not had any problems in the past.
Right.
And they pay their fees and are timely.
My question there is, do we put that into place at the night's meeting or at December? Because, if this goes on and goes back to the plan commission and we roll into 2023, maybe 50 more people will show up and then we cap the number. So if we're gonna cap the number, it would probably have to be soon, before the next round of applications open up. And then send it back to the planning commission for details on how to address.
The enforcement and all that.
There's some really good ideas,
Yeah.
the inspection, the insurance, there are a lot of good ideas that come out. I think there's an opportunity to tighten up on things. For example, anyone who's running a short-term rental without a license. We're talking about a process to find them and pursue them, but I think that should preclude them from pulling a license in the future. We need some teeth in this to make people take serious attention. If they ever want to have a license, then they need to play by the rules.
So I'm figuring out how a motion would be made that we could.
So we could cap the number.
Are you proposing an ordinance now, or what are you saying?
Is it is it a moratorium, or is this a number, like a moratorium beyond the existing number of short-term rentals, or are we gonna put that 61 number in the ordinance? I guess that's my question that I'm asking. best way to proceed with that? Or do we come
Well,
back?
I
in
think you,
December?
as
Do you
I
want to
said,
think about it and come
no,
back?
I think I think in order for, if you're going to have a restriction that's based on a zoning district, I think you need to have a public hearing at the planning commission because it is in the nature of a zoning ordinance. So if the council wants to impose a moratorium on issuance of any new licenses in that residential area above 61, I think you could do that tonight. And maybe that would be a limit. Then,
So make a motion for the moratorium 61 pending public hearing.
well, just make it, and they say that's a moratorium. Just impose that, and then let the planning commission try to develop an ordinance or within that, around that.
But I'll make that motion that we put a moratorium at 61 in the residential district.
Single family residential.
Single family residential district.
So I just want to make sure I understand what we're doing.
You
So we're locking in that number, but not agreeing to all the criteria. We're
That's
just
correct,
saying
yeah.
at this point,
We're saying no more.
we're saying just.
This is where we're at. We're not
hold
gonna
it
do more.
Right now.
No
where we
more.
are. I can live with that till things, so we can figure
Well,
out.
and
yeah.
then all this feedback can go back to the planning commission. You can have the public hearing and see where we go from there.
But this
but we're
allows
stopping at
us to
61.
not
Right.
issue any more licenses above the 61.
And allowing the people that had them last year to get theirs renewed before
The preference.
issue,
Have
issuing
They have
new.
a preference if they get everything done in the timeframe they have to do
Yeah,
it,
they
pay
have
what they need to pay.
Build it right,
Yes,
the way the ordinance is written now.
correct. Because changing
Under
the
what we've
ordinance,
got
I think what you're implying is changing the ordinance is gonna be more complicated and needs more discussion.
Because we have an ordinance in place now for short-term rental.
Yes,
It just doesn't have a cap on it
correct.
in the R1 district.
So the moratorium caps it at 60.
It's 61 and gives preference to the people that already have licenses.
So there's a motion on the table by Cups. Is there a second?
I'll second. I'll second it.
Second by Rondell. I'll do a roll call here.
Please.
Leo,
Yes.
Rondell,
Yes.
Cups,
Yes.
and Melky.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. All right. We'll take this-
My suggestion is I will bring back to you at your next meeting, a formal written moratorium that encapsulates what you did. And express your night, so we have a public record of it.
All right, and then we'll take this to the planning commission, Jeff.
Yeah, we have time to schedule a public hearing for their meeting on December 15th. So we'll get that scheduled.
We'll talk about that, yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Tough situation.
All right,
Complicated topic.
gonna go to board appointments next, and then I'll do a city manager report, but council, it's time for council to appoint its representatives amongst you to the boards, and the boards, the mayor is responsible for serving on the DDA as well as serving on the Harbor Commission or appointing his own designated Harbor Commission, so that's the mayor's purview. But council, you can choose who you want to serve on the tree board, the planning commission, zoning board, and Parks and Recreation Board. That's thing one, and then the thing number two is to update you on all the boards openings so that we're gonna advertise to the public to let people all know the terms that are expiring. The people who serve on the current boards, their terms are expiring, they can go up for reappointment, they can ask to be reappointed, but reappointment is not guaranteed if there's other people who want to also serve on the board. Council can choose either reappoint that person or to choose someone else. Not listed on here, on open positions is board review. There are two that are expiring in December 2022. So I'll make an
I'm
advertisement.
sure we'll have many applicants.
Victor, will you provide us with, like you did before, absentee and how long they've been on and
Yeah.
all that stuff?
Yep.
Great.
So we'll have all of that prior to the discussion and when.
We will. We'll do our best if we can
Yes,
find our.
thank you. I know some of those are tough, but thanks.
So yeah, but the action tonight though is to make appointments to those tree board, planning commission, zoning board, and parks board between you four. So I guess. who wants to
I'm
say
currently sit on the parks, if you guys Want to do it, that's fine. If not, I can do it again.
I'd be fine to do planning.
I'm fine remaining on zoning.
What about you, Jane? The tree board is left.
When are the tree board meetings?
Friday at noon,
Okay, that's
the
fine.
third Friday of the month.
That's fine.
Once a month, actually, it's.
Do you have a green thumb?
I planted some trees.
Yeah, we planted, we did.
You're hired.
It's actually a good board to get
It
used
is.
to the way boards work.
It is.
I mean,
I
I
mean,
appreciated being on
it's
that. actually.
The
I
only
really did.
thing that works with my
With your
schedule other
schedule,
than
too.
parks and you can.
That would do
All right, we'll just have a formal, all in favor of those appointments.
it. Oh, aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay.
Right, I'll make an advertisement, like I said, for the open positions, and we will make those appointments at the December 19th council meeting. All right, really quick, just the manager report, not a lot of activity. The county has opted out of the DDA's TIF capture. The DDA will likely discuss the city's options going forward, and of course, if there are options that, of giving, so basically, they've been opting out for the past 2 years. There have been previous disagreements, I guess, or misunderstandings several years ago that led to the county getting out of it, and you guys are all familiar with it, at least Jim Raymer and John as well. But so the DDA will discuss what their options are, because that's a significant chunk of money, $50,000 plus a year for 15 years. However, there's a county in, do we want to battle with the county over, and how do we want to approach that? So that's it. DDA will discuss that first, and if there's options, we'll come to council and discuss those options. The capital improvements plan, the draft plan is on the website for review. Planning Commission approved it and recommended approval to council. Council will look at that, review the capital improvements plan in conjunction with the 2023 budget. Finally, Jeff Grimm, our city assessor, has prepared a special assessment role for the principal shopping district. It can be viewed at City Hall, and that just died. But really, I don't have much else. No, I got one. It's over. So that's really all I had. Couple of MPPA meetings.
Okay. If there's no other business, I would move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you all for your service. Welcome, James.
Welcome, ladies.